Everyone walked past her like she was invisible, until a man in a suit stopped. He knelt, tightened a bolt, and smiled like that small fix meant nothing. She never thought about that moment again. Weeks later, she sees his name on a company list, and everything she planned cracks. This is a story of humility turned power, of a street cleaner who hides an iron will and a stranger who learns too late who he truly helped. It is a raw, emotional tale of kindness, betrayal, and slow, brilliant revenge. If you believe small acts don't matter, watch how one moment rewrites two lives forever. The morning fog had not yet burned off when Naomi James pushed the metal cart down 7th Street. Her cart was loud and plain. It was covered with stickers and dents. Naomi's hands were strong from years of work. She worked as a street cleaner for the city. She woke before dawn, poured coffee into a paper cup, and walked the same route every day. The work was not easy. Trash came in many shapes. Some of it smelled. Some of it was heavy. She smiled little. She talked little. But she was careful with her steps. She liked things to be clean. Naomi was 42. Her hair was tied back in a cloth band. She wore a city vest with long fades from washing. People in cars glanced at her if they glanced at her at all. Children saw her sometimes and pointed. Adults looked away. The street gave Naomi little thanks. Still, she kept her head up. She kept moving. She saved the coins she could. She sent a little money home to her sister, who lived across town and had 2 small children. Naomi wanted more than a cart and a route. She wanted a small apartment of her own. She wanted peace. On the 2nd Tuesday of April, the city had a small windstorm. There was a broken trash can near a cafe. The metal hinge had snapped and the lid would not close. Naomi pushed harder to lift the heavy lid. A woman from the cafe watched from the window. A man in a gray jacket walked by. He was not from around there. He had a city badge and a phone clipped to his belt, and he walked fast like he had a plan. He stopped when he saw the broken can. He fell to his knees beside Naomi and said, "Can I help?" Naomi blinked. She did not expect help. She had learned to fix what she could. She had learned to keep going. But there was something about his hands. He was careful. He fished out a small wrench from a satchel and started turning the bolt. Naomi watched him work, surprised. The bolt was rusted. The man wiped his palms on his jacket. He tightened and turned. He joked softly about bad hinges and stubborn bolts, and Naomi found herself laughing a little. The two of them breathed in the same air. The can closed with a small click. The man stood and offered his hand. "Name's James Carter," he said. "If you ever need something, call me." Naomi took his hand. His grip was firm and kind. She nodded, said thanks, and went back to her route. People in the street noticed for a moment. A man fixing a public can with a stranger. A small crowd gathered. Then the crowd moved on. Naomi's day continued as before, but something small had changed. Her chest felt warmer. James Carter was a stranger in the city. He worked as an assistant at a nearby firm. He wore good shoes and carried a briefcase. He liked small acts. He liked moments that seemed nothing but turned into memory for someone else. He did not know Naomi's name at first. He learned it later. He did not know her dreams. He learned them in time. He did not know his life would fold around this one act. For now, he walked away believing he had done a kind thing and would keep walking. The city is full of small stories. Naomi had many. She had been a nurse once years ago. A broken back ended that path. She had run a small cake stall once for a while. The city took pieces of her hopes and left marks on her hands. Yet she refused to let the city take her kindness. Naomi could be stern. She could be quick to correct people who tossed trash where they should not. She could also carry cookies for children on winter mornings. When she saw someone cold, she would secretly tuck extra gloves into her cart and leave them at bus stops. On this morning, Naomi did not guess that a man with a wrench would return to her life. She only knew that when she went home that night, she would count the small coins and hum softly. The radio in her apartment played slow jazz. Her sister called and thanked her for the money sent for baby formula. Naomi smiled and told a small lie to sound brave. "I'm fine," she said. On the other end, her sister sighed. In the weeks that followed, Naomi's life did not immediately change. The city remained loud. People still dropped coffee cups on sidewalks and tore bags open. Naomi pushed her cart through those scenes and kept her hands busy. At work, she listened to gossip and shouts. She knew who passed by each day. The man in the gray jacket passed by again once. He waved and kept his distance. Naomi waved back and continued sweeping. She thought about the moment sometimes, about how one small kindness had shifted something soft in her. She did not know the road ahead. She only knew the street and the work and the careful rhythm of her life. But the city takes strange turns. Jobs open, lists are posted, names change hands, and the people who help you once can be the same people you meet later under different lights. Naomi had no idea that one day she would stand in front of a desk and look across at a man who had once tightened a bolt for her. She had no idea what that meeting would do to the world she had learned to hold steady. For now, the morning was clear. Naomi finished her route and walked home with the scent of baking bread in the air. She felt a small hope like a coin in her pocket. The city's noon sky was bright. Naomi's route led past the corner office towers where windows reflected sunlight in a million lines. People in suits walked quickly. The street had a rhythm. Taxis honked, vendors sold lunch, and the buses stopped like the breath of the city. Naomi moved with steady hands, collecting old paper, sweeping wet leaves and smiling at a toddler who waved at her. She had little time to think about much else. She had bills, a sister, and a plan that included steady saving. The man named James Carter had become a small memory for her, a kind stranger who tightened a bolt. Naomi did not think about names much. She thought about tasks and about the small schedule of her day. But fate has a way of folding memory into present life. Later that week, Naomi saw a sign on a building. Hiring, office support. The sign felt like a distant echo. Naomi paused. She read the small lines. The job asked for dedication, good attendance, and a willingness to learn. Naomi put the number in her pocket. She did not act right away. She had felt the truth of not being welcome in some places. She worried about what people would say to a woman with a city vest and rough hands. She worried about her own voice. Her sister had talked to her about job apps. "You should try," her sister said. "You have good sense. You are steady." Naomi had kept the thought like a seed. She swept and watched the city. She thought, what is there to lose? Naomi took the number home and placed it under a small magnet on her refrigerator. The magnet held a photo of her sister's kids. A few days later, Naomi walked into the large lobby for the application. The air smelled of coffee and polished floors. A receptionist asked her to wait. Naomi watched people with their name badges and their clean shoes. Naomi smoothed the front of her vest. The city cloth looked odd in the glossy building. She felt a weight in her throat. An older man in a suit asked if she needed help filling the form. Naomi said she did not. She had filled forms before in small clinics when life was different. She wrote her name, Naomi James. She wrote for experience, for honesty. She did not lie. At the same building, James Carter opened a folder in a conference room. He did not know Naomi would be there. He did not know how the world stitches people back together. He was now working as a junior coordinator at that firm. He had brought a few biscuits for his team. He enjoyed weeks when things went smoothly. He liked to walk quickly and solve small problems. The office float of energy was bright and busy. He checked the applicant list out of habit. One name made him pause. Naomi James. He looked up, curious, and walked to the waiting area. When he saw her, his face lit with a small, surprised smile. He said her name softly. Naomi. Naomi caught him looking and felt herself flush with a new, odd warmth. The pair had shared only a few sentences when a bolt was tightened on a curb. But life works like a slow clock, and small hands can turn large gears. James remembered the wrench and the smile. He remembered how she had laughed once when the can clicked. That memory had rooted in him like a small, steady thing. He had not meant anything by it then. But seeing Naomi again, he felt the strange pull of coincidence. He introduced himself and offered help navigating the building. Naomi said thank you and asked where to hand in the application. James guided her. On paper, Naomi was not the typical candidate for the post. She had gaps in her work history, and official forms did not show the heart behind her hands. Yet James had a quiet voice for small kindness. He took a step that morning and told HR to look at her file differently. He described how she had been helpful on the street. He said something simple. This person has character. That comment did not guarantee anything, but someone listened. Naomi's interview was short. A hiring manager asked questions and watched her answer. Naomi told small truths. She was careful. She worked long hours. She had learned to be tidy and keep to time. She spoke with humility. She did not mention the time she had helped children or the night she had sheltered a dog in the rain. She wished she had, yet there was a power in how she moved and how she answered. The manager watched her hands as she spoke and then asked for references. Naomi offered a number of people who knew her from different parts of life. Weeks later, Naomi received a call. The voice said that she had been selected for a part-time support role to start in 1 month. Naomi felt a jumble of emotion, disbelief, shy joy, and a slight fear. She had done nothing daring. She had only been honest. She called her sister, and they both cried a little into the phone. Naomi folded the phone and sat for a moment. She looked at her cart in a parking area and thought about how things had changed. She looked up to the city sky and promised she would not forget where she came from. James watched from a desk and felt pride. He had not intended to change anyone's life. He had only been a man with a small tool, but he had seen something in Naomi, a steady light. He had nudged the application and done a small kindness he called a helpful note. He did not know then that this note would be the hinge for future surprises. People would say later that Naomi's calm and good sense changed the company. They would say she had a way of making space for truth. But for now, she simply packed her cart at dusk and walked home with a small smile that felt like a new coin in her pocket. If Naomi's quiet courage moved you, comment your thoughts below. Have you ever been helped by a stranger who later mattered in your life? Share your story in the comments. If this inspiring true story touched you, like and subscribe for more motivational stories of kindness, unexpected bosses, and revenge and redemption. The city still woke before the sun. The sound of buses and the first light hitting glass towers filled the streets Naomi once cleaned. But now, for the first time in years, Naomi James walked those same streets wearing a plain blouse, a borrowed blazer, and holding a small bag, not her old cleaning cart. She was nervous. She was proud. And deep inside, she was scared of falling again. Naomi had started her new office job, part-time support staff. Her tasks were simple: organize files, deliver documents, make sure meeting rooms stayed ready. She was not part of the meetings, only the silence between them. But Naomi knew how to listen. Listening had always been her secret strength. She saw how people talked differently when they thought no one was watching. She noticed who smiled with kindness and who smiled only when the boss was near. It reminded her of the streets. People dropped kindness like trash, rare and scattered. Every morning she arrived early. She'd polish the coffee machine, wipe tables, and greet others with a small nod. Most ignored her. A few returned her smile politely. Only James Carter, the man who once helped her on the street, stopped to talk. He'd say things like, "Good morning, Naomi. You settling in okay?" And she'd reply, "Trying my best, sir." James liked her quiet nature. He'd grown in the company too, now a mid-level manager. But there was one man above him, a department head named Daniel Rhodes. Daniel was the kind of man who loved attention and control. Sharp suit, sharper tongue. He saw kindness as weakness. When Naomi first met him, she felt his eyes measure her. Not her worth, but her usefulness. At first, he ignored her. Then slowly he began to notice how efficient she was, how people liked her calm energy. He'd toss her small tasks outside her role, bringing files, typing notes, running errands. Naomi did them all quietly, though she could feel how his tone carried something cold underneath. What Daniel didn't know was Naomi had been through harder things than office politics. She had scrubbed alleys in winter, faced hunger, and still kept dignity. A condescending tone couldn't break her. But the day Daniel tried to claim credit for one of her reports, that's when something shifted inside her. It happened one Friday. Naomi had stayed late helping compile client feedback. The next morning, in a staff meeting, Daniel presented it as his own. He smiled, using her phrases word for word. He even looked at her while doing it, as if daring her to speak. She stayed quiet, but her hands clenched beneath the desk. James noticed. He caught Naomi's expression, the kind of controlled silence that carried storms behind it. After the meeting, he walked to her. "Naomi, that was your work, wasn't it?" She nodded. "Doesn't matter, sir. I've learned people take what they can, but it did matter." James frowned. "You deserve credit. I'll talk to him." Naomi smiled faintly. "No, let it be. Some lessons, sir, don't need your words. They need time." It was then she decided something, not out of anger, but clarity. If she ever got the power, she would use it differently. And Daniel Rhodes, the man who took her work, would one day answer for his choices. From that day, Naomi began to learn. Every night after work, she'd stay behind, studying files others forgot to lock away. She watched how emails flowed, how budgets moved, how decisions shaped people's fates. She asked quiet questions to the IT tech, the HR girl, even the janitor who'd been there for decades. Piece by piece, Naomi built her own education, not from books but from the living heartbeat of the office itself. Her humility made people open up to her. She learned where Daniel cut corners, which clients he mistreated, and how his arrogance grew with every small success. James kept supporting her quietly, unaware how deep her focus had grown. He thought Naomi just wanted to learn and grow, but she was planting something, not revenge yet, but roots for justice. Months passed. Naomi's name began to echo in small corners of the office. She's sharp. She's reliable. She never complains. Those whispers reached upper management. One afternoon, the CEO's assistant fell sick before a major presentation. Naomi stepped in, not by request, by necessity. She arranged documents, prepared data, and saved a meeting that could have cost the firm a client. The CEO, a calm woman named Mrs. Harlow, noticed her. "Naomi James?" she asked. "You work under Daniel, right?" Naomi nodded. "Yes, ma'am," Harlow smiled. "Well, Daniel's lucky. Keep up the good work." That small sentence reached Daniel later. He didn't like it. From that day, his polite tone disappeared. He began making Naomi's tasks harder. He'd change deadlines, misplace files, then accuse her quietly of errors. He'd do it where no one could see. Naomi endured. But inside, something sharp was forming. The kind of strength that doesn't yell, it waits. One night, Naomi sat alone in the office. The lights were low. Her reflection shone in the glass window. The same woman who once pushed a cart down 7th Street But now her hands touched polished wood and her name was on official reports. She smiled bitterly and whispered, "You have no idea who you're testing." Daniel. She didn't know how, but she knew when her moment came. She'd make it count. Naomi began documenting everything, quietly and smartly. Every lie, every copied email, every time Daniel took her work or twisted numbers. She wasn't just cleaning the streets anymore, she was cleaning corruption. The storm was coming, and Naomi would not run this time. The wind was sharp that morning when Naomi James walked through the glass doors of Rhodes and Carter Associates, the firm that had slowly become her battleground. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, and every step reminded her how far she had come from pushing a cleaning cart down the cracked sidewalks of 7th Street. But Naomi wasn't walking for approval anymore. She was walking for purpose. Her old boss, Daniel Rhodes, was having a good week, or at least that's what everyone thought. His name had just been listed for an upcoming vice president position, a job that came with power, a corner office, and the kind of respect Daniel thought he was born to have. The company had posted the internal job opening, and whispers spread fast. James Carter congratulated him in the hallway, unaware that Daniel had built his success on borrowed words and stolen credit, much of it from Naomi's work. Naomi read the job posting too. Her fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled the company email. The title seemed far away, almost unreachable. But beneath the words, she saw something else. Opportunity. Daniel's arrogance had reached its peak. He had no idea that the same woman he used as his silent worker was quietly collecting proof of his lies. That night, when the office emptied, Naomi stayed behind as usual. The air was cold and the hum of computers filled the silence. She opened a drawer and took out a small notebook, one she had been keeping for months. Inside, every page was neat and numbered. Date, task, what Daniel said, what he actually did, who was present. It wasn't revenge out of hate. It was justice written in ink. As she flipped through the notes, her eyes stopped at a page from 3 months ago, the day Daniel had lied in front of the CEO about finishing a proposal Naomi had written. She had the email, the timestamp, the version history, everything. She whispered to herself, "When truth comes, it doesn't knock. It breaks the door." Naomi decided it was time. The next morning she arrived before sunrise. She wore a black blazer borrowed from her sister and tied her hair neatly. When James Carter walked in, he noticed something new in her, a calm fire. "Morning, Naomi," he said softly. "You okay?" She smiled. "Better than okay, sir." James tilted his head. He had seen her struggle in silence for months, never complaining. Now her eyes had focus, like she had already made peace with something bigger. By noon, Daniel called a team meeting to announce his nomination for the vice president role. He spoke with confidence, his voice echoing across the room. "Team, this promotion isn't just for me, it's for all of us," he said. The employees clapped, though everyone knew Daniel only worked for himself. Naomi stood quietly near the back, hands clasped. She watched him talk about leadership and honesty, the same man who had stolen her work. Every sentence tightened her resolve. Later that day, she went to the HR office. The head of HR, Mrs. Patel, looked up with surprise when Naomi entered. "Naomi, everything okay?" "Yes, ma'am," Naomi replied calmly. "I need to share something important about Daniel Rhodes." She placed a neat folder on the desk. Inside were printouts, emails, time logs, and signed documents. "I believe this should be reviewed before any final decision about the vice president position." Mrs. Patel opened the folder. The evidence was detailed and dated. Each document carried quiet thunder. "Naomi." "This is serious," she whispered. Naomi nodded. So were his lies. HR began an internal review that same afternoon. It was supposed to be confidential, but whispers have wings. Within days, people started talking. Some avoided eye contact with Daniel. Some looked at Naomi differently, with quiet respect. Daniel noticed. The confidence in his voice began to crack. He cornered Naomi one evening near the elevator. "What did you do?" he hissed. Naomi turned slowly, meeting his eyes with calm defiance. "The truth, Daniel." It finally clocked in. He stepped closer, trying to intimidate her. "You think you can ruin me? You're just a street cleaner?" She finished for him, smiling. "Yes, I was. And you're about to learn what clean really means." Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. Daniel walked away, pretending control, but his heartbeat betrayed him. Over the next week, the investigation deepened. HR found more inconsistencies, false reports, missing invoices, and budget mismanagement that pointed back to Daniel. Every layer they peeled away revealed another lie. Naomi stayed quiet. She didn't gloat. She did her work like usual, walking through the same office halls with quiet grace, but everyone could feel it, the shift in power. The janitor smiled wider when she passed. The receptionist whispered good luck as Naomi walked by. Then the final meeting came. The boardroom was full: HR, legal advisors, senior management, and Daniel himself. The air was thick with tension. Naomi was called in as a witness. She walked in calmly, a folder in her hands. Her shoes made no sound, but every step carried weight. The CEO, Mrs. Harlow, gestured for her to sit. "Ms. James, we appreciate your cooperation. Please explain what you observed." Naomi opened the folder and spoke clearly. Every word steady, every fact undeniable. She did not add emotion. She did not accuse. She simply told the truth, line by line with receipts. When she finished, silence filled the room. Daniel tried to interrupt, but Mrs. Harlow raised her hand. "Enough, Mr. Rhodes. We've seen enough evidence. This company stands for integrity, not imitation." Within a week, Daniel Rhodes's name was removed from the VP shortlist. By month's end, he was dismissed for misconduct. Naomi didn't celebrate publicly. She didn't need to. Her revenge wasn't loud, it was elegant. The man who used her silence to climb now fell because she spoke at the right time. James Carter found her later in the lobby. "You did it," he said softly. Naomi smiled faintly. "No, sir. Truth did it. I just carried the broom." That night, Naomi walked home under the same city lights she once worked beneath. But this time her steps felt lighter. Justice had walked beside her, and the world finally looked a little cleaner. If Naomi's courage gave you chills, type justice in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because in Part 5, Naomi's victory takes a shocking twist when the man she once trusted faces his own test of loyalty. The story's just getting started. A week after Daniel Rhodes's dismissal, the office was unusually quiet. The sound of footsteps on marble floors echoed differently now, lighter, freer, like the air had been cleared of something foul. People spoke softer around Naomi James, but their eyes held a new kind of respect. She had not shouted. She had not fought. She had done what most people feared to do, stood her ground with truth. The HR head, Mrs. Patel, had personally thanked her for her integrity. The CEO, Mrs. Harlow, had sent a short handwritten note. "Truth needs quiet warriors. Thank you for being one." Naomi folded that note and placed it inside her wallet. Every time she looked at it, she felt both pride and disbelief. She still woke early, still packed her simple lunch, still rode the same bus. But when she looked out the window now, the city didn't feel so cruel. Yet, she knew better than to think peace would last forever. A week later, the company announced a new senior operations manager, and the name on the email surprised everyone. James Carter. Naomi smiled when she read it. He deserved it. Kind, fair, hardworking. But part of her also felt nervous. With Daniel gone, James was now her direct superior. When James walked in the following Monday, the whole office clapped. He gave a humble smile, shaking hands, thanking everyone. But when his eyes found Naomi's across the room, there was a flicker. Part admiration, part confusion, part something deeper he didn't know how to name. After the meeting, he approached her desk quietly. "Naomi," he said softly. I wanted to thank you. You did something most wouldn't dare to. She shook her head. I didn't do it to be brave, sir. I just got tired of being quiet, James chuckled. Still, you made this place cleaner. I owe you for that. Naomi looked up, her tone calm but heavy. Then don't let it get dirty again. He froze for a second, then smiled. Not offended, but thoughtful. Deal. The next few months moved fast. With Daniel gone, James took charge. He brought new policies, fair pay reviews, anonymous feedback, better work culture. And behind every change, Naomi's fingerprints were visible. She became his quiet advisor, the one he could trust when office politics turned murky. Her street-born wisdom saw things no corporate training could teach. When conflicts arose, she'd say, People don't quit jobs, sir. They quit disrespect. And James listened. Soon, Naomi's title changed too. Administrative Coordinator. Her small desk by the hallway was replaced with a shared office space. For the first time in years, her name appeared on official memos, but power always draws attention and envy. One Thursday morning, a woman named Claire Benton, a senior executive and Daniel's old ally, began whispering in corners. Claire had always disliked Naomi. She saw her rise as charity, not merit. She was a street cleaner, Claire would mutter. Now she's advising managers? What's next, a CO? Naomi heard the whispers. She didn't flinch. She had survived worse than gossip. Still, she knew, envy is a quiet poison, and Claire was already pouring it drop by drop. A few days later, the company hosted a corporate dinner. A fancy event at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. Naomi wasn't used to these gatherings, but James insisted she come. You're part of the success story, he said. You earned it. She wore a navy blue dress borrowed from her sister and a simple silver necklace. When she walked in, heads turned, not because of glamour, but because of quiet confidence. Claire was there too, of course, sipping wine and watching Naomi with a sly smile. During the evening, Mrs. Harlow gave a speech. Our company faced challenges this year, she said, but truth and teamwork kept us strong. One employee in particular reminded us what integrity means. Naomi James, please stand. Applause filled the air. Naomi stood, humbled and shy. But as she smiled politely, she noticed something. Claire's cold stare, and James's proud yet uneasy expression. After the event, as people mingled, Claire approached James. Her tone was sweet but sharp. Impressive speech, wasn't it? Hard to believe a woman with no degree and a street job background is now the company's hero. James frowned. Claire, she earned everything here. Claire tilted her head. Or maybe she's just good at using sympathy. Don't forget, she took Daniel down. If she could do that to him. She smiled thinly. She could do it to anyone. James didn't respond. But her words stayed with him longer than he wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Naomi was on the terrace, standing alone, watching the skyline. The city lights glowed below, the same streets she once swept. She took a deep breath and whispered, You're here now. Don't lose yourself, James joined her a moment later. Beautiful view, isn't it? Naomi smiled faintly. Same city. Different floor, he laughed softly. You've got away with words. They stood in silence for a few seconds, the kind that carried unspoken respect. Then James said, Naomi, if anyone ever questions your place here, you come to me. You earned this. She looked at him, eyes steady. I don't fight with words anymore, sir. I let actions speak. He nodded, unsure why her calmness made him feel both comforted and small. But the next week, the storm began brewing again. Claire had found something, or rather, she made something up. An internal report leaked to HR, claiming Naomi had manipulated records during Daniel's case. It was a lie, crafted perfectly to plant doubt. When Naomi was called into HR and shown the anonymous complaint, her jaw tightened. She looked at Mrs. Patel and said quietly, Someone's trying to paint dirt over clean ground. Patel frowned. I know, Naomi, but we have to review it officially. Naomi nodded, calm but burning inside. She had fought too hard to be dragged down by lies again. This time, she wouldn't just defend herself. She would expose whoever stood behind this new game. Outside the HR office, James waited, his face tight with concern. "Naomi, what's going on?" She looked at him, her tone sharp with quiet pain. "Looks like the street needs cleaning again, sir." And with that, she walked away, calm on the outside, fire beneath her skin. The war wasn't over. It was only changing shape. Rain tapped softly against the office windows that morning, turning the city sky a dull gray. Naomi James walked through the front doors with her usual quiet strength, unaware that today would mark the beginning of another storm. One she could not see coming. Whispers had already begun to flow through the halls. People talked in half-sentences, lowered voices and sideways glances. "I heard something about the HR file," one intern murmured. "They say Naomi might have," but no one finished the sentence. No one dared say it too loud. When Naomi reached her desk, she noticed James Carter standing near her office. He looked uneasy, eyes darting, lips pressed tight. She set her bag down and asked, "Something wrong, sir?" He hesitated. "Naomi, HR received an anonymous complaint last night. They're saying you manipulated data during Daniel's investigation." Naomi froze. The words didn't hit her like surprise, now they hit her like déjà vu. She'd seen this trick before. When the guilty lose, they don't fight with truth. They fight with lies. Her voice was calm but cold. "And you believe that?" James swallowed hard. "No, but HR must verify. You'll need to attend a review tomorrow morning." Naomi nodded. "Let them. The truth doesn't fear light." But after James left, she sat for a long time staring at her hands. They trembled slightly. It wasn't fear. It was exhaustion. She had fought this battle before, and she had won. Yet here it was again, crawling back in a new disguise. That afternoon, Claire Benton appeared at her desk. Her perfume arrived before her voice. "Rough day, Naomi?" Naomi looked up slowly. "Some of us don't need gossip to fill our time, Claire." Claire smirked. "Oh, come on. Don't be so cold. I'm only here to help." "Help?" Naomi repeated, her eyes narrowing. "Yes." Claire leaned closer. "See, things like this can get messy. Rumors grow fast. But if you play your cards right, I could make sure the review disappears." Naomi frowned. "And what would that cost me?" Claire smiled thinly. "A little loyalty. A little silence. I'm putting together a side project and a private client list. The company doesn't need to know. You help me with access to internal files and I make this complaint vanish." Naomi stared at her, disbelief slowly turning into disgust. "So this is how you work? Lies covered with more lies?" Claire shrugged. "I work smart, Naomi. That's the difference between people like me and you." Naomi stood, her eyes steady, voice low but dangerous. "No, Claire. The difference is I clean messes. You create them." She turned and walked away before her anger could burn into words she'd regret. Claire's smile faded. She watched Naomi leave, knowing this was no longer office rivalry. It was war. That evening, Naomi stayed late again. The rain hadn't stopped and thunder rolled in the distance. She sat alone, the glow from her computer lighting her face. She opened her private folder, the one where she kept every note, every document, every truth. She began tracing the chain of the anonymous complaint. IT logs, internal timestamps, submission codes, all hidden behind layers of data. But Naomi was patient. Her years on the streets had taught her that every trail, no matter how faint, leads somewhere. Hours passed. Coffee went cold. Her eyes burned from the screen. But then she saw it, the pattern. The complaint was submitted using a VPN from inside the building, and the activity matched the same computer used by Claire Benton 3 minutes earlier. Naomi sat back in her chair, the air heavy with realization. Claire wasn't just trying to ruin her. She was covering her own crimes. Naomi smiled slowly, a calm, sharp smile. Got you. She gathered her evidence, printed copies, and placed them neatly in a folder labeled Phase 2. The next morning, the review began. The HR room was cold and formal. James sat on one side, Mrs. Patel on the other. Claire was there too, pretending neutrality, though her eyes gleamed with false innocence. Mrs. Patel cleared her throat. Naomi, as you know, this is a formal inquiry. You may respond to the allegations. Naomi placed her folder on the table. Yes, ma'am. And I also have a few things to share. If the company still values honesty. She stood, opened the folder, and began explaining step by step how the anonymous complaint had been filed, how IT logs matched Claire's device, and how timestamps aligned perfectly with Claire's session history. When Naomi placed the final page in front of Mrs. Patel, the room fell silent. Claire's confident expression cracked. This is ridiculous. She's twisting data. Naomi's tone was ice cold. I don't twist, Claire. I prove. James looked between them, realization dawning. Claire, is this true? Claire stammered. Of course not. She's setting me up. Mrs. Patel raised a hand. Enough. IT will confirm these logs today. Claire's breathing grew uneven. Her face paled. The trap she'd built had closed on her instead. That evening, Naomi sat quietly in her office. The rain had stopped and the city outside glowed under streetlights. James entered, guilt written across his face. I'm sorry, he said softly. I should have believed you from the start. Naomi didn't look up. You didn't have to believe me, sir. You just had to remember who I am. He sighed. You've every right to hate this place after what it's done to you. Naomi looked up, her eyes fierce yet calm. I don't hate it. I'm fixing it. One truth at a time. The next day, HR released their findings. Claire Benton was terminated for misconduct, falsification of internal reports, and harassment. When the email went out, the entire office froze. Naomi became more than respected. She became feared, not because of her title, but because of her truth. The woman who once pushed a broom now swept through corruption with calm precision. And the higher she rose, the more powerful her silence became. But Naomi knew something deeper was brewing. Because in her path to justice, another shadow was watching. One that knew her name, her story, and her weakness. And this time, it wasn't from below her. It was from above. The office had returned to calm, but calm can be deceiving. Everyone smiled, laughed, and carried on like nothing had happened. Yet beneath those smiles lived a quiet truth. Naomi James wasn't just an employee anymore. She was a force they couldn't ignore. After Claire Benton's sudden termination, no one dared whisper Naomi's name without respect. Even the ones who secretly envied her spoke carefully now, afraid that their words might travel to her ears. But Naomi didn't need fear to feel powerful. She wanted order. Each morning she came early and left late. Her desk was a reflection of her, neat, efficient, and quiet. But what no one knew was that Naomi had begun keeping a different kind of record. Not a notebook for protection this time, but for vision. On the first page, she wrote in bold, "You can't change the system until you understand how it's built." That became her new goal. Naomi wanted to know everything about how the company ran, from payroll to promotions, from how budgets flowed to who really made decisions, not to destroy it, to prepare herself for something more. Leadership. James Carter, her manager, had started noticing changes in her tone. She wasn't afraid anymore. She questioned decisions. She offered bold ideas in meetings, and people listened. Sometimes he admired her confidence. Sometimes it made him nervous. One evening, while reviewing reports together, James leaned back in his chair and asked, "Naomi, do you ever think about how far you've come?" She smiled softly. "Every time I look at my hands, they used to hold a broom. Now they hold blueprints," he chuckled. "You make it sound poetic." "It's not poetry, sir. It's survival," she replied. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, respect, maybe even something deeper. But James quickly looked away. He wasn't ready to understand what he felt. Over the next few weeks, Naomi began quietly reshaping the workplace. She helped janitors and junior staff file for overdue benefits. She created a small help desk where anyone could report mistreatment without fear. And without realizing it, she had become the heart of the company, the person people turned to when they needed fairness. But not everyone liked that, especially not Henry Briggs, the company's chief financial officer, a man in his late 50s, polished and powerful. He had worked there longer than anyone else, and he saw Naomi's growing influence as a threat to control. Henry was the kind of man who believed power belonged only to those born into it. He called her rise luck. He called her voice disruption. And slowly he began watching her. One afternoon, Naomi received a message that Henry wanted to see her. When she entered his corner office, the air was cold and the blinds were half drawn. "Ms. James," he began, smiling faintly. "You've made quite the impression around here." Naomi smiled politely. "I just try to make things better, sir." He stood walking around his desk. "That's admirable. But some people are starting to think you're overstepping." She raised an eyebrow. "Overstepping? For helping people?" Henry's smile thinned. "This isn't charity, Ms. James. This is business. You fix things, but you're creating waves. And waves can sink ships." Naomi didn't flinch. "Maybe it's time the ship learns to sail straight." His eyes hardened. "Careful, Ms. James. Ambition can be dangerous for people like you." Naomi's tone stayed even. "And arrogance can be dangerous for people like you, sir." For a long second, silence filled the room. Then Henry smiled again. Not kindly, but strategically. "I like your spirit. Let's make a deal." He offered her a promotion, assistant director of operations. The role came with money, prestige, and a seat at higher meetings. But his tone hinted at something else. "In return," he said softly, "you'll report directly to me, privately. I'll make sure your ideas get noticed, as long as you keep me informed about everything." Naomi realized what he wanted: control through flattery. He wasn't offering opportunity. He was buying loyalty. She smiled politely. "That's generous, sir. May I have time to think about it?" "Of course," he said smoothly. "But don't take too long. Doors don't stay open forever." As she left the room, Naomi's calm expression hid a storm inside. She didn't need to think. She knew exactly what she would do. That night she went home, sat at her small dining table, and opened her new notebook. On the next blank page she wrote, "They offer me chains disguised as crowns." Naomi refused to be anyone's pawn. She would play her own game, so she accepted the promotion. On the surface, she smiled, thanked Henry, and played the perfect role. But behind closed doors, she began quietly gathering information. She learned which departments Henry controlled, who his allies were, how he moved company funds, and what secrets he hid under his calm exterior. Naomi didn't rush. Revenge is like planting. You must wait for the right season. Weeks later, she attended her first upper management meeting. Henry sat at the head of the table, pretending mentorship. Naomi sat quietly observing. He introduced her as a fine example of our company's diversity and growth. She smiled politely, but inside, she thought, you use words like diversity to hide domination. During that meeting, Naomi noticed small financial discrepancies in the quarterly report, numbers that didn't align with internal memos. She made a mental note. That evening, after everyone left, she accessed archived invoices. The numbers confirmed her suspicion. Henry had been moving funds between accounts, hiding losses under fake vendor names. Naomi exhaled slowly. "There it is," she whispered. "Your secret mess." She didn't print anything, not yet. She knew power isn't just about what you know. It's about when you reveal it. For now, she smiled, closed the files, and turned off her screen. In the dark reflection of her computer monitor, She saw her own face. Calm, determined, dangerous. The woman who once cleaned streets now held the broom over boardrooms. And this time she wasn't sweeping dirt away. She was collecting it. The office no longer looked the same to Naomi James. Once she was invisible, a quiet shadow behind a cart, sweeping what others left behind. Now she moved through the glass halls with purpose. Her name whispered with respect and sometimes fear. But power didn't change her heart. It made her remember where she came from. Each morning, she stopped by the janitor's corner, greeting the night staff before anyone else arrived. She'd help them restock cleaning supplies or share her extra coffee. "People forget your names," she'd say softly, "until they need the floor to shine." Her words carried kindness, but also warning. She hadn't forgotten the smell of bleach and concrete from the streets. Naomi's new position gave her access to every department, payroll, operations, and even internal budgets. From this higher seat, she saw what others couldn't. Small injustices that stacked like dust, unpaid overtime, ignored complaints, promotions stolen by office politics. She started fixing them quietly. When an assistant named Rosa was denied maternity leave because of departmental needs, Naomi personally brought the paperwork to HR and didn't leave until it was approved. When a janitor named Tom was threatened with layoff for a small error, Naomi found an unused maintenance grant and saved his job. No one above her knew these things. But people at the bottom began whispering her name like hope. "Ask Miss James," they'd say. "She'll listen." She wasn't chasing fame. She was building loyalty. The kind of loyalty that could one day move mountains. Henry Briggs, the CFO, noticed the quiet shift. In meetings, his tone toward Naomi became more cautious. He'd praise her work, but always with a reminder. "Remember, Naomi, every good story ends when people forget who's really in charge." Naomi would smile politely and reply, "Then let's make sure we remember correctly, sir." Henry didn't know that Naomi had already begun tracking his ghost vendors, fake suppliers that funneled company funds into hidden accounts. She had the data. She just needed proof, and proof takes patience. One day, while reviewing invoices, Naomi noticed a delivery receipt for an equipment purchase that didn't exist. The vendor address was a small warehouse on the city's edge. That evening she went there, not as a manager, but as the same streetwise woman who used to walk those roads every dawn. The warehouse was empty. No signs, no staff, no real business. Just a hollow shell for numbers that didn't match reality. She snapped a few photos and whispered, "Got you." Naomi didn't report it yet. She needed allies first, people who believed in her, not just the title she carried. So she started meeting quietly with a few trusted employees. Rosa, Tom, and a young data analyst named Malik. They met after hours in the staff break room, drinking bad coffee under flickering lights. Naomi spread the papers across the table. "These are fake accounts," she said. "Money's being moved off record. If we expose it wrong, it'll look like we're the problem. So we do this right, with evidence and with heart." Rosa frowned. "But what if they come after us?" Naomi smiled gently. "They already did long ago. We just stopped being afraid." Malik leaned forward. "So what's the plan?" Naomi's voice was calm, steady. "We're going to clean the house, quietly." Over the next few weeks they gathered data. Malik traced transactions. Rosa kept track of vendor contacts. Tom, who had friends in logistics, checked which deliveries were fake. Piece by piece, Naomi built a web of truth, one so detailed that even lawyers couldn't deny it. But she didn't just focus on revenge. She also rebuilt the human side of the company, something Henry and others had destroyed with greed. She started a new internal program, Work with Dignity. It allowed employees to report mistreatment anonymously and offered small bonuses for team improvement. It was simple but revolutionary. Mrs. Harlow, the CEO, noticed. "Naomi," she said one afternoon, "you've become the soul of this company." Naomi smiled humbly, just trying to keep the floors clean. Ma'am, they both laughed, but deep down, Harlow knew there was something special about Naomi, something unshakable, but success brings shadows. Henry Briggs began to sense her influence growing faster than his control. He called her to his office one late evening. The lights were low and the city glowed behind him. "Naomi," he said with forced calm, "you've been doing remarkable work, but lately I feel like you're running your own show." Naomi met his gaze evenly. "You asked me to bring results, sir." "I did, yes," he said slowly, "but you're getting too much attention. Harlow's been praising you a lot lately. That's dangerous." She tilted her head. "Dangerous for whom?" Henry's eyes darkened.
"Careful, Miss James, you may think you've come far, but remember who opened the door for you." Naomi's voice stayed soft, but her words cut sharp.
"Yes, sir, and I'm the one who learned how to build a better door." Henry's jaw clenched. "Don't test me." Naomi stood, her face calm but firm. "I'm not testing you, sir. I'm reminding you. Walls don't stand forever when the foundation is rotten." She left before he could reply. That night, Naomi returned to her apartment and sat quietly by the window. The city lights shimmered like broken stars, each one a reminder of how far she'd come. She whispered to herself, "This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about respect. For every hand that held a broom, for every worker they stepped on to climb." Then she opened her laptop and sent an encrypted email, a summary of evidence she and her small team had gathered. The subject line read, "Confidential unauthorized financial activity. Attention, CEO's office." She hit send. The die was cast. The next morning, Henry Briggs entered the office unaware that the storm he had tried to avoid had already been written by the woman he underestimated. Naomi didn't smile when she saw him. She didn't need to, because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's the quiet confidence of knowing the truth is already moving. The morning sun crept across the glass towers like a slow wave of gold, but inside Rhodes and Carter Associates the light felt colder than ever. Whispers filled every hallway. A rumor had escaped from the upper floor. A rumor about a confidential investigation. No one knew who it was about, but everyone felt the tremor. Naomi James arrived at her usual time, calm, focused, unreadable. She moved through the office quietly as if nothing had changed. Yet her inbox told another story. An email from the CEO's assistant sat at the top marked "Urgent, Ms. James. The CEO has requested your presence in the boardroom at 10 a.m. sharp. Confidential discussion." She read it twice, closed her laptop and whispered, "So it begins." At 10 emails, the boardroom door closed behind her with a solid click. Inside were the people who ran the company, Mrs. Harlow, the CEO, the legal director, HR head Mrs. Patel, and at the far end of the table, Henry Briggs. Henry looked calm, but Naomi saw the tightness around his jaw, the kind of calm that breaks before the storm. "Ms. James," Mrs. Harlow said, gesturing for her to sit, "we've reviewed your report. I want to thank you for bringing it to us directly." Naomi nodded. "The truth needed to be seen, ma'am." Henry leaned forward, his tone silky but sharp. "With all due respect, Ms. James, you've made some heavy accusations. I think you've misunderstood some of our internal numbers. Budgets move around all the time." "That's just business." Naomi looked him dead in the eye. "Then why do your budgets lead to an empty warehouse, sir?" Silence. The legal director's head snapped up. Mrs. Patel's pen froze mid-note. Naomi opened her folder, spreading printed pages across the table, each one crisp, dated, labeled, undeniable. Vendor lists, bank transfers, fake purchase orders, photos of the empty warehouse. "Every transaction over the last 8 months," she said clearly, "matches your personal sign-offs. You moved over $300,000 into shell accounts. I traced every step." Henry's mask cracked. "That's absurd." "It already verified the access logs," Mrs. Patel interrupted softly. And the timestamps match your system login. Mrs. Harlow leaned back, her voice calm but lethal. Henry, do you have an explanation? For a moment, Henry said nothing. Then his voice dropped to a low growl. You people are unbelievable. First Daniel, then Claire, now me. You let her destroy everyone in her way. He pointed at Naomi, his face red, veins showing. She's manipulating you. A woman who swept streets now playing detective? You can't see what's happening? Naomi stayed silent. Her expression didn't change. She didn't need to yell. Truth didn't need volume. Mrs. Harlow's tone was ice cold. Enough, we've already confirmed her findings. Legal has begun auditing all financial statements. Henry froze. The color drained from his face. Mrs. Harlow continued. You will be placed on indefinite leave effective immediately, pending full investigation. Henry stood, shaking his head. You're making a mistake. She'll ruin this place. Naomi finally spoke, voice calm, low, and heavy with truth. No, sir. I'm saving it. The same way I used to clean streets by removing what doesn't belong. He glared at her, but she didn't flinch. For the first time, power belonged entirely to her. Not borrowed, not given, but earned. Security entered quietly. Henry's badge was taken. His protest echoed down the hall as he was escorted out. The boardroom sat in stunned silence for a few seconds. Then Mrs. Harlow turned to Naomi. You just saved this company. Naomi shook her head. No, ma'am. I just told the truth. Mrs. Harlow smiled faintly. Truth, Ms. James, is the rarest skill in business. Later that afternoon, Naomi sat alone in her small office. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but release. Months of pressure had finally broken open. She stared at her reflection in the window. The same woman who once wiped sweat from her brow on cold sidewalks. The same woman who pushed a broom when no one looked twice. And now her truth had cleaned a corporation from the inside out. But as she sat there, her phone buzzed. A message from James Carter. Naomi, I need to see you. It's urgent. She walked to his office. He was pacing, holding a document in his hand. His expression was heavy, conflicted. Naomi, he said quietly, I don't know how to tell you this. What's wrong? He handed her the paper on an internal memo. It was from the executive board. It stated that an emergency shareholder meeting had been called to discuss leadership restructuring. Naomi frowned. Leadership restructuring? James nodded. They're blaming Mrs. Harlow for letting this corruption happen under her watch. Some of the board members want her replaced. Naomi's eyes widened. But she didn't know. She's the only one who stood for truth. James exhaled. I know. But these people don't care about right or wrong. Just image and money. And guess who's leading the charge? Naomi froze. Who? James's voice hardened. Henry Briggs. He's rallying investors from the outside. Naomi clenched her fists. He's not done. James nodded grimly. He wants revenge, and he'll use the same truth you exposed to destroy Harlow. Naomi felt a cold anger rise in her chest. The very man she brought down was now using her work as a weapon. She looked out the window, her reflection lit by the fading sun. Then I'll end this. For good. James placed a hand on her shoulder. Naomi, this isn't your fight anymore. You've done enough. She turned to him slowly, her eyes fierce.
Sir, the fight ends when justice stops running.
And I'm not done running yet. That night, Naomi didn't go home. She sat in her office, lights dimmed, her laptop open. The skyline shimmered beyond the glass. Calm on the outside. Chaotic underneath. She began digging deeper into Henry's connections. The network of investors. Shell companies and friends in high places. What she found made her chest tighten. Henry wasn't acting alone, he was backed by someone within the company. Someone close. Someone Naomi trusted. She scrolled through the files, her heart pounding, and then she saw it, a familiar name, a signature, James Carter. Her breath caught. For a long time she didn't move. The man who once helped her fix a trash can, who believed in her, who stood by her, had quietly signed off on 2 of Henry's fake vendor approvals months ago. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he did. But one thing was clear. Her next battle wouldn't be against a stranger. It would be against someone she once called friend. Naomi leaned back in her chair, whispering to the empty room. Even the kindest hands can leave dirt behind. And in her eyes burned the same steady fire that had carried her through every storm before. The sky was dark and heavy with rain when Naomi James walked into the building. It was the same kind of morning as years ago. Gray, cold, and tense. But this time she wasn't pushing a cart. She was carrying the truth. The emergency shareholder meeting was set for 10 a.m. in the top floor boardroom. The company was on edge. Investors flying in, directors whispering in corners, and reporters waiting outside for a story that smelled like blood. Inside, the stakes were simple. Mrs. Harlow's leadership was being questioned, and Henry Briggs, and the man Naomi had exposed, was using her own findings to force her mentor out. And beside him, through the glass wall, Naomi saw someone she never thought she'd doubt. James Carter. He was sitting 2 seats away from Henry, his expression distant, his hands folded. Naomi's heart tightened. She still didn't know the full story, whether he had knowingly helped Henry or if he was caught in his web. But trust once broken cuts deeper than any betrayal. At exactly 10:00, the doors shut. The room fell silent. Mrs. Harlow, calm as ever, sat at the head of the table. Her eyes met Naomi's for a second, a silent exchange of respect and faith. Then she turned to the group. "Let's begin," she said. "Mr. Briggs, you called this meeting. State your case." Henry smiled, smug and polished. "Of course, Madam CEO, it's simple. Over the past year, Rhodes and Carter has faced multiple internal scandals. 3 executives gone, investors shaken, and profits under review. While Ms. James uncovered important truths, the responsibility for oversight ultimately falls on you." His words dripped with false reason, but everyone knew what he was doing, turning the hero's victory into the leader's failure. Mrs. Harlow's voice stayed steady. "And what exactly do you propose, Henry?" He leaned back. "A vote of confidence. For new leadership, for stability, for someone who understands both business and appearances." He gestured subtly toward James. Naomi's chest went cold. She looked at James. He didn't move, didn't look at her, didn't deny it. Henry continued, "Mr. Carter has proven himself reliable, loyal, and capable of restoring trust. With his experience and moral clarity, he would make an excellent interim CEO." The word struck Naomi like thunder. She stood, unable to stay silent.
Moral clarity?
Her voice was sharp but controlled. "The same man whose signature appears on 2 of your false vendor forms, Henry?" The room froze. Henry's confident smirk faltered. "You have no proof." Naomi opened her folder, the same one that had ended Daniel and Claire before him. She laid 2 documents on the table, invoices signed months ago. Each transaction was approved by you, Mr. Briggs, but these 2 also bear the digital signature of James Carter. I verified the timestamps. They were processed through your office's shared network. All eyes turned to James. He finally spoke, his voice soft, breaking slightly. "Naomi, I didn't know. I swear. Henry sent me those invoices when I was handling budget reallocations. He said they were legitimate vendor updates." Naomi's heart twisted. She wanted to believe him, but she had heard those words before from people who had buried their conscience under comfort. "Maybe you didn't know," she said quietly. "But you signed them. Your hands cleaned his dirt for him." Henry laughed bitterly. "Oh, how noble. The street cleaner who thinks she can clean the world. Let me remind you, Naomi, without people like me, you'd still be sweeping gutters." Naomi turned slowly, her voice calm but burning. "You're right, Henry, I used to clean gutters. And you know what I learned? The filth always rises to the surface and it always stinks before it's gone." A few board members gasped softly. Others exchanged glances, unsure whether to admire or fear her. Mrs. Harlow spoke then, voice measured but cold. "Enough grandstanding. Ms. James, what exactly are you suggesting? Naomi looked at her mentor and then at the table of powerful men and women. That the company holds its vote today, but with all facts on record. She turned to the screen behind her and connected her laptop. Files appeared, and audit trails, emails, transaction maps. Every connection between Henry's fake accounts and offshore subsidiaries flashed in sequence. And at the bottom of it all, one transfer stood out. A personal wire from Henry's holding company to his private account labeled consulting fees. Gasps filled the room. Naomi continued calmly. He wasn't protecting this company. He was bleeding it. And now he's trying to replace the woman who let me expose it with the man whose name he used as a shield. Henry slammed his hand on the table. You think anyone will believe? Mrs. Harlow stood. Her voice cut through the noise like thunder. I believe her. Henry froze. So do I, said Mrs. Patel from HR. And I, added the legal director. Soon the chorus spread, one voice after another. Naomi didn't smile. She simply turned toward James, who was still sitting, pale and shaken. He whispered, Naomi, I'm sorry. I should have checked. I should have trusted you. She looked at him for a long moment. You didn't have to trust me, James. You just had to see me. He lowered his eyes. The guilt in his face said more than words ever could. By noon, the board had voted. Henry Briggs was permanently terminated. Mrs. Harlow retained her position and immediately announced a new vice president of operations. Her voice softened as she said the name. Naomi James. The room erupted in applause, some sincere, some shocked, some reluctant. Naomi stood still, heart pounding, barely able to process what she'd heard. Mrs. Harlow smiled gently. You fought for truth when no one else would. You cleaned more than the floors here, Naomi. You cleaned the culture. You earned this. Naomi's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She simply nodded and said, Thank you, ma'am. I'll keep it clean. When the meeting ended, Naomi stepped into the hallway. The sound of rain echoed outside. James followed her quietly. Naomi, he said, voice low. You have every right to hate me. She turned to him, tired but kind. I don't hate you, James. I just learned something. He frowned. What's that? That not all betrayal is evil. Some of it is just blindness, but blindness still hurts. He nodded slowly, tears building in his eyes. I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. Naomi smiled faintly. Then start by standing up for what's right, even when no one's watching. With that, she turned and walked down the hall, steady, graceful, unstoppable. Behind her, the city thundered, but for Naomi James. The storm had finally passed, and the woman who once cleaned streets had just cleaned an empire. The rain had stopped, but the city still shimmered under a thin silver mist. Naomi James stood by the tall window of her new office, higher than any floor she'd ever worked on. The same streets she once swept looked tiny now, like memories drawn in dust. A golden nameplate sat on her desk, Naomi James, Vice President of Operations. But she didn't smile at it. She just touched the letters softly and whispered, We made it. Outside, the world was buzzing. News outlets had already picked up the story. Whistleblower street cleaner becomes corporate hero. From broom to boardroom, Naomi James cleans corruption. Every headline carried her name, her face, her journey, but Naomi didn't care about fame. She cared about meaning. She turned and looked at the framed photo on her shelf, a picture of her old cleaning crew. She had taken it years ago on a rainy morning. Most of them had since retired or moved away. They were the invisible hands that kept the city alive. She smiled and whispered, This victory is ours. The company had changed almost overnight. The fear that once hung over employees was gone. People laughed more. They greeted the janitors by name. Even small things, like thank yous and good mornings, had started to return. Naomi made sure of it. Her first executive decision wasn't about profits or projects. It was about people. She launched a new initiative called Roots. It offered education stipends for low-level workers, mentorship for janitorial staff, and flexible programs for single parents. She told the board, "We rise faster when no one is left sweeping behind." It wasn't just policy. It was a promise. A few days later, she visited the basement maintenance room, the place she'd started. The smell of detergent and metal hit her like a memory. Tom, the head janitor, almost dropped his mop when he saw her. "Miss Naomi, or should I say, Vice President Naomi?" He laughed. She chuckled. "Still Naomi, Tom. Titles don't scrub floors." He grinned, shaking his head. "Never thought I'd see you back down here." Naomi looked around the small, cluttered space. The broom racks, the old vending machine, the bucket she once pushed through the hallways. "This place made me," she said softly. "Every step up there started down here." Tom nodded, emotion in his voice. "You give the rest of us hope." Naomi smiled warmly. "Then hold on to it. Because hope's the only thing they can't take away." Meanwhile, the world outside had turned her story into inspiration. Students wrote essays about her. Workers quoted her lines on social media. People called her the street cleaner who changed the system. One local TV host even invited her for an interview. Sitting under bright studio lights, Naomi was calm and graceful. The host asked, "Ms. James, what would you say to people who feel small, overlooked, invisible?" Naomi smiled softly and said, "I'd tell them this. The world sees power in money and titles, but real power lives in patience, kindness, and persistence. You don't need a corner office to make a difference. Sometimes justice wears a work shirt." The studio went silent for a moment. Then applause erupted. Back at the company, James Carter had been quiet since the board meeting. He still worked there, but he kept his distance, guilt hanging heavy between them. One afternoon, he knocked on her office door. Naomi looked up from her paperwork. "Come in, James." He stepped inside, holding a small envelope. "I'm resigning," he said quietly. Naomi frowned. "Why?" "Because you deserve this place, not me." I lost sight of what mattered. She stood, walked around her desk, and looked at him. Really looked at him. "James, you made mistakes." "So did I. But running away doesn't clean the mess. Facing it does." He hesitated. "You're forgiving me?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, James. It's about freeing yourself to build again." He nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "Then thank you." Before he left, she said softly, "James, you were the first person who saw me when no one else did. Don't forget that." He turned, eyes glassy. "And you were the one who taught me what seeing really means." That night, Naomi stayed late again. The building was quiet, the lights dim. She opened the window slightly, letting the cool city air in. She could hear faint sounds going to buses, distant music, street cleaners working below. Her heart tightened. Those were her people, her world. She reached into her drawer and pulled out the old broom handle she had kept from her city days. Worn, splintered, wrapped in tape. She placed it against the wall of her office, a silent reminder that no title should ever erase where you began. The next morning, Mrs. Harlow stopped by. "You're early again?" she said with a knowing smile. Naomi grinned. "Old habits, ma'am." Harlow looked at her warmly. "You've done more than fix this company. You've redefined what leadership means. You made people believe again." Naomi's tone was humble. "We just cleaned out the lies, ma'am. The rest was already here. Good people waiting to be seen." Harlow nodded. "And they finally are." Later that day, Naomi stood on the rooftop terrace watching the city spread beneath her. The wind tugged at her hair as sunlight broke through the clouds, the kind of light that makes even glass buildings look soft. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Justice doesn't need noise. It just needs a steady hand." Then she smiled. Not the smile of victory, but peace. The street cleaner was gone. The leader had risen. And through her, the city had learned one unshakable truth. When you clean with honesty, even the dirtiest system shines again. This is where her story comes full circle. The revenge has been served. The system has changed. But now Naomi's real victory lies in what she leaves behind. A legacy that inspires others to rise from the same streets she once walked. The city was calm again. The gray clouds that once loomed over Rhodes and Carter had lifted. Sunlight spilled through the skyscrapers, golden and clean, like the world itself had been washed new. Naomi James stood in the courtyard of the company headquarters, watching as employees planted a small oak tree near the entrance. It was her idea, a symbol of growth, honesty, and rebirth. Mrs. Harlow had named it the Truth Tree. Every person in the company had touched it, from the executives to the janitors. And today, as Naomi pressed her hand into the soil, she whispered, "Grow strong. The roots matter more than the leaves." The same words she had lived by all her life. Months had passed since the confrontation that changed everything. Henry Briggs was behind bars for corporate fraud. Claire Benton had disappeared from the city, her reputation destroyed. And Daniel Rhodes, the man who had once stolen her work, had reached out from afar, sending her a letter of apology. Naomi never replied. She didn't need to. Her silence was answer enough. The company had changed in more ways than anyone imagined. Workers no longer feared speaking up. Pay scales became fair, and for the first time in years, Rhodes and Carter's annual report closed with a surplus. Not just in money, but in integrity. Every success, every smile in the building, every voice that once stayed silent, all of it was Naomi's real revenge. One morning, Naomi received a letter in her office mail. It wasn't from a client or a colleague. The envelope was simple, handwritten, addressed from a local high school. She opened it and began to read. "Dear Ms. James, our class has been studying modern leaders, and your story came up during our project. I didn't know people like me could ever sit at those tables you sit at. My mom is a street cleaner. She always comes home tired, but she never complains. She says work is work as long as it's honest. When I told her your story, she cried. She said, 'Now they'll finally see us.' Thank you for showing me that being small doesn't mean being powerless. Jasmine Williams, age 16. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. She leaned back in her chair, holding the letter to her chest, whispering, "That's why." She had spent her whole life proving that hard work could rise. But in that moment she realized something bigger. Her story wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or ignored. That weekend, Naomi visited her old neighborhood, the quiet blocks where she used to push her broom through cracked sidewalks and overflowing bins. It was early morning. The streets were still wet from dawn rain. At the corner of 7th Street, she saw a young woman in an orange vest sweeping. Her rhythm was slow, patient, familiar. Naomi walked closer. "Morning," Naomi said kindly. The woman looked up, surprised. "Oh, morning, ma'am," Naomi smiled. "You do good work. These streets look cleaner than I've ever seen." The woman blushed. "Thank you. Not many people notice." "Oh, I notice," Naomi said softly. "I used to do what you're doing." The woman blinked, not sure if she'd heard right. "You? But you're—" Naomi laughed gently. "I'm just someone who knows how to start from the ground." She pulled out a card from her pocket and handed it over. "Come by my office someday. We're starting a training program for city workers who want to move into management. You'd be perfect for it." The young woman stared at the card, eyes wide. "Are you serious?" "Completely," Naomi replied with a warm smile. "Don't ever let anyone tell you that your work isn't worthy of respect." As she walked away, Naomi heard the woman whisper, "Thank you." And in that single word, she heard an echo of her younger self, tired, unseen but never defeated. Later that day, Naomi stood at the top of her building, looking over the same city skyline that had once seemed unreachable. The air smelled of rain and hope, Below, people hurried through the streets, some in suits, some in uniforms, all part of the same heartbeat. Naomi whispered to the wind, "I don't want power to change me. I want it to lift others." She thought about everything. The humiliation, the long hours, the betrayals, the victories. Every moment had shaped her. Every tear had carved strength into her soul. Then her phone buzzed. It was an email from Mrs. Harlow. "The board has approved your proposal. Congratulations, Miss James. The Naomi James Leadership Scholarship for Working Women will launch next spring." Naomi closed her eyes, letting the tears fall this time. Her name, once ignored, now stood for something unshakable. That evening, she took a long walk alone through the same streets where her story began. The lamps flickered softly, reflecting on puddles. She passed a mirror in a shop window and caught her reflection. Older, stronger, wiser. And for the first time in years, she smiled with no pain behind it, because she understood now. Revenge wasn't about seeing others fall. It was about rising so high that no one could ever doubt your worth again. She stopped for a moment, looked up at the stars breaking through the clouds, and whispered, "Mama, I made it. But I didn't climb, I cleaned my way up." And with that, Naomi turned the corner and disappeared into the golden light of the city, the same light she had earned with sweat, courage, and truth. In a world where power often speaks louder than honesty, Naomi James proved that integrity doesn't whisper, it echoes. She rose not by stepping on others, but by lifting them. From the broom to the boardroom, from silence to strength, she became the storm that washed corruption away. Remember her name. Remember her story. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is respect.